So just doing this blanket thing of, we'll just sell a bunch of national park dirt and build housing. Terrible approach. There is an approach to do, they just haven't done it yet.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Land Development Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Glick. We have an industry news episode for you today, and joining me, as always, is Charles Covey. Hey, Charles, how's it going?
Hello.
Well, we've got, again, as always, we've got a lot of stuff going on in the industry, and we're going to touch on a few different topics today, digging into some action going on within the current administration. And then we're going to touch on some topics we've talked about previously, but we're going to dig back into them and kind of give an update on things. And jumping right in today to our first topic, article number one comes to us from Fox 29 Philadelphia through their YouTube channel. And the headline reads, "Trump considers declaring housing emergency." So I think all of you listening in have probably heard about this to some degree. So we're going to dig into this topic because it's really interesting and it could have a big impact on our industry. So this one is actually a video, as I said. So we're going to listen to this video here and then we will react.
Your money news. President Donald Trump is considering declaring a national housing emergency this fall, according to Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. The White House, though, has not released any specific details yet.
And not every Republican is on board with the plan. Fox's Mike Emanuel reports.
Our housing industry is good, but it could be phenomenal.
President Trump is putting the spotlight on housing. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says the president is considering a national housing emergency declaration in the fall to address high costs and low availability. There aren't many specifics available, but the White House is reportedly looking at standardizing local building and zoning codes and decreasing closing costs.
We're looking at what the president has available to him. This president understands real estate. He understands housing better than anybody. We will fix this housing market.
It comes as the president ramps up his war of words with Fed Chair Jerome Powell, claiming his reluctance to cut interest rates is making housing unaffordable.
We have this affordability crisis, and there are two ways to fix it. We're bending the curve on inflation, and then we can bring down prices.
But some conservatives are opposing the emergency declaration, arguing the market needs to correct itself.
We want to encourage home ownership, but you got to have the housing out there. The housing stock is not growing fast enough. That's the bottom line here.
And Democrats who have made housing affordability a major issue say President Trump is just playing politics, hoping to appeal to more moderate voters ahead of the midterm elections.
Affordability is something that has to be applied across the board.
The president is also reportedly considering dropping tariffs on construction materials to bring down new home prices. In Washington, Mike Emanuel, Fox News.
Well, I know there's a lot of different, they haven't come out, as they said in that, they haven't come out and talked about like all of the things that could be included in this, but they did touch on a few of them. What are your initial thoughts on this, Charles? Do you think it's something that has legs that actually might happen this fall?
Well, that's a unique precedent. The part that concerns me a little bit is that the way that we're set up to run as a country is that there's certain rights that states have that they should be able to do on a state-by-state basis. So the problem is a lot of them aren't doing the things they need to be doing. There's a few exceptions. Florida's leading the way at the moment, kicking everybody's butt and trying to make it the way that it should be. I think they're gonna make a pretty hard run at abolishing and getting rid of property taxes, which is enormous. Hopefully they set the standard for everybody. And my fingers are crossed that Texas is behind them, is following shortly behind them. But I'm concerned about a larger, blanket statement of a housing emergency. More government control is not actually what we want. Is it good for our industry? Maybe, potentially, but at what cost? So I'm just going to be very cautious about it. I think optimistic that this administration has a housing focus. We haven't seen that in quite some time. So huge for all of us that have a livelihood tied to it, but also don't know that I want to give up states' rights for that gain.
Yeah, and this is all coming out relatively recently. I mean, just last week, this news broke and was mentioned in the public. And so still a lot to unpack with this, and we'll see what happens. I'm in sync with you on this. I worry a little bit about overreach of the federal government, because I think, and we've talked about this before on the show, is that when when you're guys in power and they're doing things that you want them to do, it does set a precedent where when someone's in power that you don't want to be in power and they start, deciding certain things at the federal level that should be at the state level, I think it could in the future, present us with some problems and some things happening that we don't want to happen. And so I think there's other ways to go about it, but I will be interested to see what happens here. And this ties into interest rates as well, because that was touched on in that video there about, hey, let's see, we need, rates can help drive some of this naturally, I guess, in the market. I don't know how natural it is, but can drive some of this. And so I'd like to see what happens and what the reaction is by the market with interest rates before any additional things start to happen from the federal government. All right, well, next segment on the show is from the comments. And this one here actually came in to me from a DM. And so I don't include who the person's name is because it was, I didn't ask for permission to include their name. Anyway, the headline reads, or the title of it is Great Podcast. I have been looking for exactly what you have here, sir. Great podcast from what I have seen so far. I will be busy watching past episodes and keeping up with the future ones as well. Keep up the good work.
I think it's definitely appropriate to say that this is from a name. They work for a company that everybody on this podcast knows, and I think that's notable. Like this is becoming the place where people go to get information in our industry, and that was always the intent, right? We wanted to be a great source for information, maybe even the premier source for information about the specific thing that we do.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say too, is that we get messages like this quite a bit, and so the podcast is growing and growing, and it's great to see. And the feedback that we get has been really good. And we've got a lot of things in the works too, with some big partnerships coming up that I think you all are going to be pretty excited about, which is only going to help the show grow and allow us to even bring more great content to all of you. So a lot of good stuff on the horizon. And again, as I always say, that's because of all of you listening in and continuing to support us. So really appreciate that. All right, well, let's move on to article number 2. This one comes to us from the Associated Press. Headline reads, Republicans move to lift drilling and mining restrictions in Western states. So from this article, on Wednesday, September 4th, the U.S. House of Representatives voted largely along party lines to repeal land management plans established during former President Joe Biden's administration. These plans had limited fossil fuel development in areas of Alaska, Montana, and North Dakota. The repeal aims to lift restrictions on drilling and mining across public lands in Western states. The rollbacks align with former President Donald Trump's energy agenda, which includes declaring a national energy emergency to accelerate fossil fuel project approvals. The Bureau of Land Management recently approved an 18.3 million ton coal lease in North Dakota. A larger lease for 167 million tons in Montana is planned, but contingent on overturning Biden-era land protections. Republicans defend the move as reducing government overreach and promoting economic growth. Democrats criticize it for potentially exacerbating climate change and increasing reliance on coal. The Senate, also Republican majority, still needs to approve the repeals. This marks the first use of the Congressional Review Act to reverse a federal land use plan. Indigenous groups and environmental advocates express concerns about risks to wildlife and subsistence resources. And this article also talked about, in addition to the energy uses for public lands, it also talked about some of the development potential for public lands, which we've talked about before. It doesn't seem like it's just because of where they're located, it's not necessarily going to be maybe huge for the development community, but it is something I wanted to keep on the radar, and is why I included this article in here today, is because the administration is still thinking about public land use and how it can be used in different ways. And so it could have an impact on us.
Yeah. So there's several things to unpack here. People go up in arms about the whole coal thing because it's a very obtrusive method for extracting natural resources. However, the reclamation that they have to do, I've been on coal mines, with the strip coal mines where they're going back and reclaiming, and they do a phenomenal job of reclaiming the mine, putting everything back. So when they're mining coal, they're moving through an area and pulling the coal out of that particular vein, and they're covering it. So they have to remove the overburden, remove the coal, put the overburden back, and then they reclaim it and put it back in a way that is uh, it's very heavily regulated, and it looks fantastic when they're done. So I think any of the issues on the coal thing, not a problem. The real problem there is because we're not continuing to develop more nuclear capacity in the U.S. We don't have enough power, people, and there's not other methods that we have that are even in the ballpark until we get more nuclear developed. There's nothing else even close to coal. So we have to have the coal. This is a national security thing. Like, we have to have the power. Coal's the way to do it. This needed to be done from just strictly from the coal standpoint. This was a very, very important thing. Now, when it comes to the land stuff that impacts all of us as developers, yes, to your point, there was a bill that was 2 million acres that was going to be sold off. It was kind of vague how they were going to do it, maybe auction it, maybe do some other stuff. It was about 2 million acres from national parks. And everybody was up in arms. Every bow hunter, every fisherman, every environmental group, everybody, they put down their disagreements. They put down their weapons, no pun intended, for a minute to agree that the national parks needed to stay national parks. The challenge there is that from a housing standpoint, when they're going to sell off this 2 million acres, it wasn't going to go for affordable housing. It was going to go for golf courses and high end second, third, fourth home communities for people that don't need a house. They have one or two or three. And so there was plenty of money to be made doing it, but it was not an impactful scenario for the average American. And the people that were going to make money and the people that are going to spend money in that scenario, they didn't need to. This was not a need by any means. This was just this was a nice want to. But if you're just getting a want to and you're giving up 2 million acres of land that now you can never get back, probably not worth it. So that was one that I thought was really interesting. The concept, though, of federal lands that could be used for needed housing, absolutely. There's a scenario there that works for a lot of people, but it's not the lands that are in national parks in Utah or Idaho or Montana. It's individual parcels. I'll give you an example. So the Veterans Affairs Administration owns tons of land in every major city where they've got a campus, right? They have a campus where they've got hospitals. And I grew up near one. We used to go and do some good work and entertain the veterans and do stuff with the guys that were in that veterans nursing home. Well, hell, there were several empty parcels. They're still empty now that are part of this giant campus that they built back in the 70s. And these empty parcels, they don't need new buildings for Veterans Affairs, but the government's just sitting on this dirt. And those are 3, 4, 6, 10-acre parcels that could be used for housing because it's in a major area or in a metro area that needed housing. It's not in a major metro, but it was in an area that could use the housing. And there's a Veterans Affairs complex in most major cities in the country. And so that's just one example of scenarios where you can repurpose or reuse or otherwise put housing on a government parcel that's not being used. And I'm sure that there's plenty of other instances where there's a government building that's abandoned, or it's a lot that was purchased, or somehow otherwise the government got it and hasn't used it. The challenge is we have this giant machine of a government and trying to figure out where all this stuff is with all the different agencies that have their hands. There's 100-something agencies that have their hands on different assets. And so it's a challenge to make this happen. So just doing this blanket thing of, we'll just sell a bunch of national park dirt and build housing. Terrible approach. There is an approach to do, they just haven't done it yet. And so this goes back to the conversation, and I'll wrap this up because I'm getting kind of long-winded here. But this goes back to the conversation that we've had before about having a national housing czar or someone like that could take this project on, and you would go to these agencies and you'd have to have the president behind you to make them do it because nobody wants to, and make them give you a list of all the things that they're not using, properties, buildings, other real estate assets that they're not using or that could be repurposed or they're partially using or whatever. Then you'd have to compile this. We have the data. We have AI. We could do it. And now you've got, who knows, maybe there's 10,000 assets that we have to then analyze. Okay, maybe there's 500 of them that could actually be used. Maybe we do a tranche of 100 of them now. You got to do all the stuff to do this massive portfolio sale, individual parcel style. It would be challenging. It would be a bit of a lift, but it could absolutely be done. I don't think the government's the person to do it. Probably would be better served having private industry do it. But there's a way to get this done. There is a way. I don't know who's going to have those discussions, but we're not there yet.
Yeah, good insight on that. I hadn't really thought about all that land. I mean, it's a lot of infill development then that would be happening within cities that
right, which is what we need.
Yeah, right. Right, exactly. All right, well, let's go ahead and shift into our third article here. This one comes to us from Fox Business on their YouTube channel. Headline for this is "It Stunk. Economic Experts Unpack the Jobs Report." So we're going to listen to a short video here related to interest rate projections, and then we will react.
22,000 jobs in August. That's well below the estimate. It turns out now that they shed jobs in July. It was the first decline since the first year of the COVID pandemic. So the good news is that the weak job market makes a quarter-point rate cut basically a slam dunk. You can't even say that a half-point cut is out of the question. It's not likely, but the betting odds there on Friday were about 14% for a half-point cut. Falling rates make stocks and bonds more attractive. Right? That's good, right? But the problem is you'd much rather have the Fed leaning toward cutting rates because inflation is muted, and we're not quite there yet. So that's why I think that the stock market didn't really charge higher on Friday. It did end slightly higher for the week.
You know, you saw a reset of Fed cut expectations on Friday. The markets are now expecting 3 quarter-point reductions this year. It had been 2. And they think that the short rates could be 3% or less by the end of 2026, compared with around 4.5% now.
So we are just about a week away from the September 16-17 meeting from the Fed, where they're going to be making a decision. We're going to be learning exactly what type of rate cut we're going to see. Right there, we heard that it seems like a quarter point is the most likely, but there is still a scenario where a half point could be done. What are you thinking is going to happen, Charles?
This is a wild scenario of a Fed chairman who seems to be in a political showdown with the president. Not good for interest rates. So this is wild to see play out. I mean, it's kind of interesting. It's kind of fun to watch. It's not good, but it is certainly it's good TV. Let's say that it's good entertainment. I think Trump likes the show. He likes the show, even if it's conflict and uncomfortable. You saw you may have seen the video where he and Jerome Powell are standing next to each other, and he's basically talking crap about him to his face. I don't think we've ever seen this in the history of our country. Someone so willing to say what needed to be said, or say what he thought needed to be said. I don't know if it was actually productive to the narrative, but it's really fascinating to see all this play out. My guess, quarter. I would hope for a half, but either way, a half or a quarter is not what we need overall. Like, this is just like a tiny drop in the bucket of what's necessary to make the market actually move.
So we'll know on the next episode that we have. We'll know what the decision was, and we'll be able to react to that and talk about it. But yeah, tune in next week to see what the Fed actually does. Again, that's September 16 and 17. You'll see the schedule here for the October and December meetings this year as well. October 28 and 29, and then December 9 and 10. So those are more opportunities for potential rate cuts between now and the end of the year. All right, well, let's go ahead and get into a final bonus article. So as I was putting together the slides for this episode, I just happened to see an article come through from Resi Club that I wanted to include because it had to do with a topic we touched on briefly before. So this article number 4, again, comes from Resi Club. Headline reads, "Home builder layoffs rise, especially in Texas and Florida, as pricing power slips." So from this article, residential building construction employment has decreased by 3,800 jobs, about 0.4% down from its cycle high in March 2025. Residential specialty trade contractor employment has declined by 44,000 jobs, down 1.8% from its peak in September 2024. The John Burns Research and Consulting Survey indicates that 63% of U.S. home builders reported recent layoffs among their peers, while only 14% reported no recent layoffs. In Texas, 87% of builders reported recent layoffs among their peers, while in Florida, 79% reported the same. Home builders in the Midwest and Northeast reported the lowest levels of layoff activity. Builders are reducing corporate staff and scaling back on speculative construction in areas with high months of supply to avoid margin compression. Despite concerns over labor availability due to immigration policy changes, builders report that labor remains plentiful and costs have not significantly increased. Residential construction employment often declines before broader economic recessions, serving as a leading indicator of economic downturns. So I know we both have people we know who have been impacted by some of these layoffs, and so it is something that's definitely happening, and we're seeing. What are your thoughts on kind of the numbers here?
Well, I think this is funny. They're scaling back on speculative construction in areas with high months of supply to avoid margin compression. I don't know why we have to use these big words. I mean, this is just hilarious. In finance, we see this all the time, but people feel like if they use big words like margin compression, that it makes it seem like it's a bigger thing. They don't want to have to fire sale stuff. They don't want to make less money. Simple. So they're trimming the fat, and it's only fat because the sales aren't high enough. There's just not enough homes moving. So this is part of the cyclical nature of that particular industry, and this is not new. This has been happening since I've known about the industry and been involved in it since I started framing houses at 16. So I've been pretty in tune with what's going on in the housing industry ever since. And we've seen these cycles. This happens, and the instability of that type of work, especially on the corporate side, is just the nature of the business, and everybody in it knows it. And I think a lot of times people forget until it happens, and they forget that last cycle the same thing happened, and the cycle before that the same thing happened. Everybody kind of loses track of that. But if you go back and look, the same exact scenario has repeated itself over and over. So we're in a low point in the cycle, and I think most of us intuitively knew that already. But we'll see what happens over the next probably a 24-month time frame before things would have the opportunity to really get back into motion, assuming that we get rates falling like they should over the next 24 months. They can't fall immediately. We can't do this in 12 months. It's not possible. So 12 months might be better, but 24 months is probably more realistic to see things back to a level that we would consider good. So challenging. Some friends of ours, friends of the show, that are in the same situation, but that's just the nature of this. And so it's going to take some creativity to find ways to maybe do a different type of work or work in a different industry or do something different until things come back. So the numbers, not shocking based on what I've been hearing. If you go to my LinkedIn and look at the people that have open to work that are in the land acquisition department of the major builders, like there's some on there for sure. Quite a few over the last few weeks, and that's unfortunate. So we definitely feel for them, and it will come back. It always does, but could be challenging over the next 12 to 24 months.
Yeah, and I pulled this chart from that article on Resi Club. So the headline of the chart is John Burns Research and Consulting: Share of Home Builders Reporting Layoffs Among Peers in Their Local Housing Market. So essentially, this shows a couple different states, and then it goes through the regions of the country. And as we saw in the article, Texas has the most, followed by Florida, then Northern Cal, and then it kind of goes into the regions. Across the country, 63% said yes, that they've had layoffs, and then goes Southwest, Southeast, Midwest, Southern Cal, Northwest, and Northeast. That's kind of the order. So you can check out the video version of this if you want to see that chart, or just head over to Resi Club and you can see the actual article there. To take a look at this chart.
I would love to see this overlaid with if you take all these same divisions of every major builder and then throw in the regionals that are in those regions, and then you overlay which ones have had the highest growth over the last decade. I'm guessing, could be wrong, but I'm guessing it's going to be pretty similar to this list, ranked top to bottom. So I think that's notable, because they're the ones that are laying off are the ones that had the most staff, and the ones that were further out there looking 2, 3, 4, 5 years to grow that pipeline, and to really, based on the scale of the last 4 or 5 years, to try to keep up with that number. They had to have this team, but that number is not real anymore. Now it's scaled back. And so I think that's the ones that are not laying off as many people, they weren't reaching out as far. They didn't have as much growth. They didn't have the need to be growing a pipeline at quite the same clip as everybody else did at the top of this list. So again, not shocking. None of this is no one's freaking out. This is just normal and part of the cycle that we're in.
Well, that brings us to an end here. That's all the articles we have for this episode. Any parting thoughts, Charles, before we wrap up?
No, I think we really want to pay close attention to the stuff that's coming from the White House, because we're getting more White House chatter on housing than we've seen in a very, very long time, at least that I can remember. Maybe you can remember something in a previous administration, but housing has become such a hot button. And we talked about this and hoped that this might be the case. This is whatever last year we were talking about this kind of thing. So great, this is an amazing scenario where we have housing as one of the key topics of it's on every news channel. It's on most of the press conferences. Like, this is a top 5 topic in the country, and it hasn't been for quite a while. So that's great, because I think that's going to help propel us out of the trough that we're in this part of the cycle. So I think having that top of mind for all the people that are decision making and all the people in DC, hopefully, that are decision making and actually doing things as opposed to just talking about it. Hopefully those things are getting done. That will pull us out of this particular trough that we're in. And it's good for everybody involved.
All right, guys. Well, if you look down in the description for this episode, you'll see a link there to the show notes page. All of the articles that we discuss on this are always on that show notes page, so you can click through there to go if you want to go and read more about any of the topics that we covered. Otherwise, that's all for today. If you're not subscribed, click that button to subscribe. We'd love to have you back for our next one. And our next one is actually tomorrow. We have a great interview that you'll want to tune in for. So we will talk to you all tomorrow.